Welcome to Learning to Glow, a show about wellness, skin health, and self-development. I'm your host, Jess. I'm a mom, entrepreneur, and skincare expert. I'm so excited to share tips on how to achieve healthy skin and bring amazing guests in the field of health, fitness, aging gracefully, and personal growth. Let's explore all different ways we can take care of ourselves as women, both inside and out, to truly shine. So let's get glowing. Hello and welcome to the Learning to Glow podcast. I am your host, Jess. I appreciate you being here today. We have a great episode and a little something different compared to what we normally do. But as we discuss in this episode, this is very much in line with this podcast of wellness. We're talking about money and finances. We have Shinobu. She is a certified financial planner, money expert, best-selling author of Investing Is Your Superpower, and creator of Empowered Planning. As a first-generation American, she has firsthand experience navigating the financial industry from a career perspective and personally to build wealth. She spent the first half of her career working for some of the largest financial institutions in the United States, including Smith, Barney, and Fidelity Investments. As a financial advisor, she created financial plans for high net worth individuals across the United States, overseeing more than $350 million in client assets. Now Shinobu has taken all of her knowledge and created a simple, proven method for teaching personal finance. She has delivered over 500 live workshops covering a wide range of topics, from budgeting to estate planning. Her goal is to simplify the complex world of money and investing by empowering people everywhere to reach financial freedom. We talked about in this episode a few different things, but one of them was myths of savings. She talked about how our finances can be a major area of stress. 8 out of 10 Americans report being stressed out about money. She shares some wonderful mindset practices around our finances. I asked her to share how we as parents can help guide our kids when it comes to money. I loved her tips on this. This was my favorite. I will link her Instagram and her website in the show notes so that you can check her out. She is incredible. So honored that she was able to come onto the show. I know you'll love this episode and enjoy. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Learning to Glow. Today we have our special guest, Shinobu. Thank you so much for being here with me today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So happy to see you. We've known each other for a few years now, and I'm so happy to talk about this topic. But before we dive into it, please, if you could introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do, your background, all that good stuff.
Yeah, Shinobu Hindert. I'm a certified financial planner. I have a book called Investing Is Your Superpower, and I teach classes. I do some public speaking, but the whole purpose is to really help women feel empowered by their money instead of intimidated or hiding from it. So I really just try to create content that will build that confidence along the way.
I love it. I think this is such an important topic. And before we met today, I was doing some research, and one of the statistics that I found was 8 out of 10 Americans feel stressed about money or have money concerns. And this is such a wellness topic. It is such a source of stress for so many of us. And it's something that I think a lot of people kind of shy away from and put their head in the sand because it can be so overwhelming and stressful. Do you find that to be true with a lot of people that you talk to?
Yeah, and I think that we just don't know what are the resources, when is an appropriate time to ask questions, how do we ask questions, who are we asking them to, and also building that trust. This is really personal, even though I've been out there speaking about it for a couple of years, more in the public recently, and we're feeling empowered by it to some extent. It's still uncomfortable, when you're talking about it. But I would say right now, with costs being very high everywhere and increasing in certain places, and even though the data is coming out saying inflation is down, we're not then seeing retailers or, at the groceries prices going down. So we're kind of still accounting for more expenses. So there's just been this buzz, I feel like, around my circle that people are talking about money more than ever in more of a stressful way.
Mm.
not in this, easygoing, nonchalant way. So I think it is difficult to talk about. It's uncomfortable, especially if someone's feeling a little stress. It could be uncomfortable if someone's having a lot of success and they don't want to kind of rub it into other people. So it's just a tricky topic to navigate for many people when it's not your primary job.
Yes, and especially like you said at this time where it feels like uncertain, like a lot of people think we're heading for a really bad place and that there's a lot of fear I feel like as well.
Yeah.
So, I wanted to talk about some and especially like as we're talking about it's tighter in a lot of areas for people whether like you said at the grocery store or wherever. How do we save and if we're feeling those increases and also like share some of the myths about saving?
Yeah, I think the first thing of how do you save is we just have to get really comfortable taking a look at what we're spending. And it's time consuming to do that, right? I mean, you can use apps for sure, but you still have to link them up to everything. You have to then go in it and pay attention to it. And it can be kind of uncomfortable because you're examining yourself. If I have this conversation with clients, it's way easier for me to have that conversation. I'm the third party having it. If I'm having that conversation in my own home, I'm also feeling like, ooh, I did go out a lot for coffee or lunch, 2 weeks ago or something like that. I think the busier seasons in our lives, we end up spending money a little bit more freely than we'd like to. And then on top of that, then you're going to look at your budget and then there could be some shame or guilt attached to it. And we want to desensitize ourselves to that and give ourselves some grace and saying, right now it's back to school season. I mean, it's very busy, kind of re-getting into your routine of things that if you end up spending a little bit more money on going out to eat, you don't need to feel guilty about it, but you do need to stay aware. And you need to stay aware. And then maybe every year, September, we just spend more on school supplies, on all the signups for activities, on after school, whatever it is, and account for it and plan for it. So you don't feel kind of a double whammy of I'm spending a lot. Now I'm feeling guilt that I spent a lot. And we're not able to save as much. It's okay if you can't save as much in 1 month. It's not okay if all of a sudden that becomes 12 months and you're not feeling great about that. So I think examining your spending, raising awareness of where you are, it will help. And then again, the more you do it, the less sensitive you're going to be to it over time.
Oh, for sure. And I feel like just taking that first step and that's hard to do for a lot of people.
It is.
They're like, I,
Yeah.
I don't want to, I don't want to look at what I spent. And then, you may have also a partnership or a relationship where you don't see eye to eye with your partner. I can see that causing some issues too. So having to look at it and then maybe having to look at it with someone else might cause a little bit of stress, I would think, for
Yeah, I mean,
some
I tell
people.
people to plan an activity that feels nice after, and or even during. If it is your partner and it makes them uncomfortable, or maybe it makes you uncomfortable, maybe you're the spender and you need to pay attention to it, but you don't want to feel bad about it. It's just like, hey, I just want to have this open conversation. It could be something where you go for a walk, you go for a hike, and the intention is like, we're going on this hike, but we also need to talk about our finances and we're out in nature and like, it's okay if we yell at each other a little bit because we're not, on top of our kids or the neighbors, whatever the case is, and just to talk about it. So it's not like you're sitting there, with your financial statement in front of you and you're staring at each other in the face. I mean, that's just a tense environment. So for other people that once you kind of get into the rhythm of that, if it's not, a needing to get out in nature and whatever, do it that way. It could be where you're sitting down at the table on a Saturday morning and then afterwards you're like, okay, we're going to go on a, date tonight. We have a babysitter or, whatever the case is, but it's this reward to say we know we're doing something out of our comfort zone. It's also just kind of annoying, right? Like we work during the week, we have our kids, the weekends are sacred. The weekends are sacred. So then to have to do homework on the weekends, it's just kind of a bummer. So if you just say, let's plan something fun afterwards, it takes away that tension. And then you're also, again, associating, desensitizing yourself to it, and then associating with a reward afterwards. That's going to become a routine and you're going to feel good about going into that. So I've seen people transition from being really uncomfortable, potentially even having fights around it, to coming to this place where they have a whole fun day planned after they do it. And it's just like this routine. And they'll just message me like, we just had our, financial date, and like all the details about it. And then it starts to become a fun activity and can actually bring couples a lot closer.
Yeah, I feel like also if that's something that you've been like hiding from or avoiding, and then you kind of get it out there, it's always probably it's not as bad as you build it up in your head, I would assume a lot of times, but then also going into it with like not defensive, like maybe your mindset before you even get into that environment in the first place could help.
I totally agree. 100%.
So you've done that step and you're on the same page, or you're not with a partner and doing this, but you're kind of analyzing what your spending is, and you think like, wow, this isn't there's not a lot of leeway here. So what would you say if you're like, but this person really wants to start saving, but there's like a lot of different buckets that they want to prioritize? What would you say at that point? What's the next step?
Really, I guess prioritizing, but then also like the ultimate goal for that. Because if it's just kind of cash flow out for temporary things that you're spending money on now that are going to go away, you do have to prioritize also saving for the long term, saving for a rainy day. I mean, if you don't have an emergency fund saved up, that becomes a priority. So I think just identifying where are your savings right now, when you want to save more, like for what purpose? Is it because you don't have an emergency fund? Now all of a sudden that's really important. Is it because you're saving for retirement? Maybe you're already doing some, but you want to do a little bit more, and see where you can cut back. And it really, it can be tough, but you also have to make tough choices when it comes to your finances. So you can't do everything that you want to do. You can, enjoy yourself today, save for your future, but you have to do it in a way that is appropriate for yourself, prioritizing yourself. If you don't have a pension that you're relying on for the future, well, then where is your money going to come from the future? Is it an inheritance that you can completely count on? If not, you have to prioritize it today and save some money and figure out where that is. The best way that I find for people to do it and make it more of a habitual thing that they do is automate the savings and treat it like a bill. You're not going to not pay your cell phone bill, right? You're going to get that from Verizon or whoever your provider is, and you're going to pay it. And a lot of times we automate it so we don't have to look at it, think about it. I would do that for yourself for savings. Just automate that, put it in there every single month. And then every 3 months or every other month, put a calendar reminder for yourself, see if you can increase it at all. And again, it could be a situation where you have pockets of the year or seasons of the year where you cannot save as much. Maybe you pause those months, but then go back to it. You just don't want those to build on each other. If you don't have money to save, you really have to examine the amount of income that you're making, where you're living, what your expenses are. Because if it's not sustainable, you might be able to make it through today or maybe for a couple of years. But what's going to happen in the future? Are you saying that somebody else is going to come and give you money to live on? And is that realistic? Are you going to ask your children? I mean, where are you going to live? I mean, those are different conversations. Those are more like crisis management conversations where you and I are kind of talking about money planning. And we're in this stage where we can actually plan. And I've seen it on the other end where people haven't done that planning, and it's devastating. And those are very different conversations. So if there's a lifestyle change that needs to be made today so you can have that wiggle room, you need to explore that 100%. Like you give maybe your job, you need to consider that as well. So it could be like more income. Well, how do I make more income? I would search based on your skill sets, everything that you're doing. What are competitors paying? Are you in line with what you should be making? Maybe it's picking up a side hustle, a second job. What does that look like? Is that sustainable? Where can you cut back? And having those hard conversations, but you're in the driver's seat versus the other way around where you didn't have those hard conversations and now you're kind of being told what you need to do because you don't have any wiggle room.
Yeah, I love that. Those are good tips. I feel like that's a good point as far as, okay, I want to put money into these buckets, and not just how can I save, but how can I make more if need be, or if it's time to ask for that raise or whatever it may be. What are some other myths when it comes to savings?
Have debt they feel like they can't save. I think sometimes, well, there's a lot of emotions tied to debt, and people can kind of get obsessed with paying down their debt. And that's like their only focus is like, I have to get rid of this debt. And you do also simultaneously want to save. Now, it might feel counterintuitive if you're getting, 4% in your savings account and your credit card's charging you 22% interest. You're like, logically, that doesn't make sense that you're asking me to save money and pay down my debt. But if there were an unexpected expense that comes up and you don't have cash on hand, you have to put on the credit card. And then it just kind of feels deflating in that sense. So over time, doing both, yes, it's going to take you a little bit longer to pay off that debt, but you also have wiggle room on the other end if something pops up, an expense. And then when you're done paying your debt, you can also look at your savings and go, oh, I still have this money in there. It can also be kind of knock the wind out of your sails when someone pays off their debt. They're feeling so great from it. They get a little high, and then they turn around and they look at their accounts and they're like, ugh, I don't have any money saved. Where we just kind of want to use this as not like a one and done task, just how do we create these little tiny micro habits that are going to create bigger habits that are sustainable for the long term. And it's just creating these habits of saving.
When I first started my wellness journey, I had already been in the skincare industry for years, working on client skin and as an educator for multiple skincare brands. When I learned about how the toxins in our personal care and beauty products could have a negative impact on our health, I knew I needed to make a change. I was used to the result-driven products that I was working with, and I was not happy with the natural products on the market at that time. Although they were safer and cleaner, they did not meet my expectations for results. I created Simply Just Skincare to deliver the results my clients demanded from their products while using natural, toxin-free ingredients. You can check out my clients' results and reviews on my website, simplyjustskincare.com. In 30 days, my clients have reported more hydrated skin, less appearance of fine lines and wrinkles, and more of an overall glow. Our top sellers include our Repair Toner, our Hydrating Undo Serum with hyaluronic acid, and more. I am offering my listeners 20% off their first order with code PODCAST. Check it out in the link in my show notes to get glowing today.
So would you say, now that you're saying like you could also be paying down debt and saving at the same time, if you're someone who doesn't have anything in it, like a specifically for those days where we're retired, would you say you need to have like another bucket for putting money away for the retirement as well at this time? Or is that more like focus on the savings and the debt?
Yeah, there's a hierarchy for the savings. The first would be have an emergency fund. So that's about 3 to 6 months worth of your monthly expenses. So if you're just round numbers here, if you're spending 10,000 a month, you'd want to have 30,000 saved and cashed if you're in a 2 income household. If you're in a single income household, then you'd really want to look at 60,000 saved for 6 months. So just in case you want to look at that, if I were to lose my job or lose my sources of income tomorrow, how long would it take me to find equal paying job? The farther you go out in your career, the longer it could take for you to replace that income if you're at a higher income base. So if you're looking to replace minimum wage, well, maybe you could do that pretty quickly. But if you're at a higher income base, you want to account for that too. So kind of more savings. Once you have your emergency fund there, you should also save for retirement, and that should be a separate account. So you kind of just want to go through this hierarchy of, first I need to make sure I have a rainy day fund. And then after that, kind of move it on to more investing and saving for the longer term.
Okay, that's helpful. And I feel like if you're in this, going through this process, one thing that I've seen you talk about a lot online is like the mindset around money. And I'm wondering, like, if you're going through this process and you're feeling maybe this is hard, like you're feeling very frustrated or despair even just because you're not where you want to be at a certain age. I know I've felt that before. Talk to us about how mindset can make this process better or possibly worse, because I feel like, I've had times in my life where my expectations of where I thought I should be money wise are so different than my reality, and it's very defeating.
I would really focus on just baby steps. What's something right in front of you? And I would look at it like, even when, if you're in your career or anything, is, for yourself, like your business now, right? Like if you looked at that day one and you're looking at where you are today, there's part of you that's like, well, how am I going to get there? How am I going to do all of that? It's easy to talk yourself out and be like, well, that's not going to happen. No, it's not going to happen overnight, but you're doing these things. And then over time, now your goals get even bigger because you're like, okay, well, I was able to achieve these kind of goals that I had earmarked for myself. Now that I have them, usually people don't quit there. They don't stop there. They're like, okay, well, what's the next journey? What's that going to look like? And even for your money, no matter what, whether we like it or not, money is in every aspect of our lives, and we have to make financial decisions every single day, even if it's, should I go and buy this cup of coffee? I mean, that's a financial decision that we're making too. Like, is this a good time to buy a home? All of those. So the same thing, like desensitizing yourself, making yourself feel more comfortable making those decisions is really important. And the mindset part of it is, really, I have 3 steps that I encourage people to follow. Is like, number one, just acknowledge what you're feeling. It's easy for us to just bury our head in the sand and be like, I just don't want to think about it. It's probably true that you are very busy and you don't have time to think about it. So you can push it to the back burner, but just acknowledging where you're at and acknowledging, like, I'm not where I want to be. I wish I was there, and then creating true statements for yourself of like, well, then, we're basically replacing, like, I'm not where I want to be too. I understand what I can do to get closer to where I want to be. And then find a way to move through it as the last step, is like, well, what is that going to take for you? You don't want to just like say those statements and then throw them away. Maybe it's hiring a professional to work with you. Maybe it's talking to your best friend who's in a better financial situation than you are and just talking through it for accountability. Maybe it's your partner, but like finding what that step 3 is for you to actually move through this. So, because it's those same conversations we have with ourselves are going to pop up again and again and again. And it's usually when we're on the brink of doing something big and making a bigger financial decision. Maybe it's a job change. We're going to have all of these like doubts in our minds that you do want to address. You don't want to push them away because they're going to pop up later on when you make a financial decision, and people can confuse those with like a gut instinct telling them not to do it. It's like, the gut instincts are helpful in some cases. When it comes to financial decisions, your gut is usually just telling you, I need more information. So you don't want to just go off of your gut. It's like, well, I'm not I need more information on this job change. What is this going to look like? How can I build my emergency fund? What if this job doesn't work out? Really, what are the financial consequences? So just acknowledging where you're at, creating true statements instead of telling yourself, I'm not where I should be. Like, how can you replace that with something positive? And then what's the third thing is, what can you do to move yourself through this feeling? And then knowing, once you have that, you can refer back to it. Every single time this comes up, you're just like, okay, I know what to do. I'm not going to hide away from this. I'm going to acknowledge how I'm feeling right now and just find a system that works for you to get through those.
Yeah, I feel like, and then finding that system and having that knowledge is just going to make you feel more confident to deal with it in the first place. And I feel like a lot of that's where your book would come in too, doing it like a book even, and just like getting some information that way. And that's something that I've done because a lot of us do not grow up knowing about money and what to do with money. And I remember being in my 20s, by my 20s, early 20s, I had already had to consolidate my credit card bills. And, I was in college and I just did not have enough to make it. And it was a good experience. Like, it really taught me how to I look at a budget kind of, but I also was like, you know what? I need to use this credit card to get through the rest of the month.
Yeah,
Or
I get
I
that.
had like a department store job where the only way we could get our discount was to put it on the company card,
Oh gosh.
which had like a 25%. And I mean, here I was buying makeup like I needed it, but I'm like, well, I have to get my discount. So I do feel like there's a lot of things I wasn't aware of, and I didn't really have these conversations with my family. So I think this is a good, if you don't mind, I'd love to talk about this a little bit because a lot of my listeners are moms, and I feel like some of us don't even know or have like strong financial backgrounds or haven't been very good with money throughout our lives, but we want something better for our kids. We want them to not, like, I do not want my kids to be opening up a Macy's card
Yeah.
when at any point in time. But as for parents, like, how can we help teach our kids and like guide them in the right direction when it comes to money? Because they're so young. Like, if I would have done what I wish I would have done in my 20s with that money instead of that outfit at Forever 21 and put it away, like, wow, what, I'd be in a different place.
I think just talking about it and having them be aware, especially when they want big ticket items as they get older, if it's like, I want an iPad or I want a laptop or anything that's cost a little bit more, really explain to them in terms of your own work how you purchase that. So it might be like, this is the equivalent of, 3 days of working, and then and I have to pay for groceries and that. So even if you're going to the grocery store, just really explaining how much stuff costs for them, so they just start to associate and understand, like, this item costs more than another item, and like, why does it cost more? And I will kind of do it with my kids a little bit, is like, when you go to the grocery store and I'm spending money, I'm working, I'm then going and spending money on food. You guys are eating the food. The food goes to the grocery store, and the people working at the grocery store are then going to go and spend that money. And really just explaining to them how money works. And it's kind of, I'm not going to talk about inflation with my kids, but it's essentially what's happening right now is how quickly money is changing hands. As very quickly as driving up costs. So for people to understand really how money works. So again, it's kind of desensitized to them. It doesn't feel like this taboo topic for them to talk about, of like, here's just the reality. This is where money goes when people are spending it, and this is what they're doing. And letting them know, on average, this is how much money somebody makes when they work at a grocery store. So when you're taking a look at those things, like for someone to go and buy an iPad and they were working at this grocery store, like, this is what it would take for them to do that. So they have a better understanding. I think being able to purchase things online takes away from that experience of like saving money, having cash, going to the store. It's like we're losing all of that. So they almost think like, it is free. I just push buttons and it shows up at the door. So I think just taking time to slow down, explaining these to them and talking about it in terms that they could understand. And I do think, having them do meaningful chores around the house is also helpful, for them to be able to save their own money and then spend it as they would like. So they can start to get to know themselves. And then you'll see it with your kids, like, that's an impulse shopper, or my other kid's really careful and they do save. And just to understand what their habits are, so you can have different conversations with them about that as well.
That's so true, isn't it? I have the same thing in my house where one kid has, from the very first moment we started allowance, he still has all of that money sitting there, and the other one is always in the hole. So it's I'm like, it's just interesting how your personality kind of plays into all that too, and it is so true. Oh my gosh, of like, literally we're pushing on our phones buy, and it just shows up the next day at our front porch. So that's a good point. So if you have like older children and say they're getting ready to go to college or something, and they are going to be on their own, their financial purchases are going to be more in their hands, what would you recommend? And like, I think for like like when your kids are old enough to go into college, what are you going to talk to them about, like credit cards and different things like that?
I think helping them understand to build credit and not to be so afraid of credit either, because they're going to need credit later on to purchase a home, to get a car, student loans, like anything that they really want to do. Unless they have a ton of money saved, they're going to need to leverage credit. And there's a way to have a healthy relationship with credit. So I think looking at it as a way to build it, there's banks and companies out there that you can do a co-credit card with your children. So you're the signer, they're on it, but it actually is tied to their credit report, and it can help them build credit. So I think also doing that so you have some control or insight onto how they're doing it, and having them kind of test the waters with it in a safe way so they're not damaging their credit right away. But having that conversation of, if you do want to open a credit card, let's talk about it, and have that open conversation that they understand it's not just like quick money, it's tied to them. But I think building credit, and even if they were to take like a quick online class about building credit and then talking about it with you, they have a credit card, they're able to do that, will really help. And I think if they are already working, even at age 18, going and helping them open up a Roth IRA, even if they're
Okay.
putting like $100 in it, but it's like, this is for your future. You're going to build inside of here. Let's purchase a mutual fund. Like, have them go through all of that so it's not so foreign to them. And they start doing that at a younger age, that it's going to be part of their thought process later on.
I love that. That's so smart. Yeah, I know a lot of my listeners have kids who are going away, and I remember like on the college campuses, I was just talking about this with a friend. There was like booths, and like, if you open a credit card with us, you can have a free Frisbee or something, like some incentive. And there were so many kids doing that. So I think this was so amazing. Thank you so much. Do you have anything else you want to share with us before I let you go?
Well, the only other thing I would say for kids is you could also kind of incentivize them as a parent to be like, if they hit certain like milestones with their credit card or savings, that you'll do like a matching program, that you'll give them $100 bonus. So that way they're not like, okay, mom's being annoying, I'm not going to listen to her, I want that Frisbee. Just try to think about how they're thinking and what you can do to kind of meet them meet them in the middle.
Yeah. And I think that's so true. Like, there are going to be things that they want to do with their money. And it's like, I think for me, of course, especially if you've made mistakes financially, you don't want that for your kids.
Sure.
You hope that they make different decisions, but that's always, ultimately, it's up to them. And, I also learned a lot of lessons just on my own by living life, and it all got sorted out okay. So please tell us where we can find you and your book, of course. I'm going to link all of this in the show notes as well.
Perfect. It's empoweredplanning.com is my site, and the book is Investing Is Your Superpower. It can get it at Amazon or Barnes & Noble.
Well, thank you. It was so lovely seeing you, and thanks for sharing all this wisdom with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode. Please subscribe and review so we can reach more people who want to learn to glow alongside us. See you next time.